I'll take it. So basically, the deal goes that the world was really old at one point, and then a bunch of people went all over it. And now we had, after that, a flood. And then those people started having different languages and cultures. And here we are together, and it's really good to see you. Because we're all the same breath of God, right? Isn't that kind of cool? What's up? I'm Andreas. This is Kwaku. That's Latter day Chad. It's Dr. Longo. You know what I mean? The Longo's in the house. Old World, Florida. Keeping it real. How you doing, Dr. Longo?
Chilling, dude. How you doing, Andreas?
Oh, I'm stoked to be here because we had all of us this interest in talking about like this origin point and then also what the world was like before. You've been doing all these amazing videos talking about the Western Hemisphere and Atlantis, and a lot of the Atlantis research has been pointing to Florida. I mean, for a while now, other people have been corroborating the work you've been showing. And there's also this like heartland model idea of an ancient like beginning of man like out of the Western Hemisphere into Eurasia, into Africa, into the rest of the world. We look at like the haplotype maps and everything like that, haplotype X, right? And we can see like the spread. And then we can see things like these stories that we have, like these biblical ideas, or Book of Mormon, even like Jaredite and Lehi like journeys. And there's all this idea of at one point in history there were more advanced civilizations that were traveling all over the place, and wherever we go we see like records of those people, and then they have cultures that we've tried to erase, but there's still like legacy to those cultures. Kwaku's been really into that recently. Kwaku's been all about reincarnation, right? Like that's been something you've been checking out. It's like objectively in every tradition
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. I've become obsessed with it, unhealthily obsessed with it. And I'm noticing that the more we uncover about the past, the more we uncover about ourselves. And you don't want to get too, like I just did shrooms and listened to Graham Hancock, but there does seem to be,
Someone's gonna clip just that part of you.
yeah, someone's gonna clip the. By the way, I changed my shirt because right as Andreas got on, I was like, I can't be the only guy with a great T-shirt, so I went and I had to put this on to mimic what everyone else. I
That's
guess
what's going on here. I
this
feel
Indiana
bad here.
Jones kind of shirt is really
There we
yeah.
go. There we
I
go.
don't have
just
the vibes, but
just for Chad,
but yeah, I also strongly think that if it is possible we've had these multiple lives, I mean, accessing some of those memories in some of these forgotten about places that did exist. I mean, just going down that avenue would completely wake people up, completely change the way you look at history. But it's metaphysical and it's psychoparanormal, so people kind of look away. But the academics, the mainstream people have been wrong so many times. I mean, they've been wrong consistently over and over again. So why don't we just check out some of the weird ideas?
Right.
Someone says, "Oh, what about these old pyramids on the old Florida seal?" They go, "Oh, well, that's ridiculous." Well, old Florida will tell you, guess what? There was some interesting stuff going on there. So reincarnation has really kind of opened my mind to lead me to into these new kind of forbidden avenues, but they're the most fun ones too. So
Totally. That's actually, again, Chad and our thing has been the Deuteronomist reforms. The Deuteronomists come in and say, this is how you're going to do it. If you do it any other way, we're going to probably not just spank you. We'll probably turn you,
yeah,
going to burn you alive and other things, right? So the Deuteronomist is pretty scary, but you look at the Jewish traditions before the Deuteronomists. I mean, we talked a bit about this before, but the Gilgul Neshamat is the Jewish concept of reincarnation and the transmigration of souls, even more specifically. So this idea of, energy or spirit is working its way through these cycles or wheels even, right? Like the Gilgul means wheel, which is like chakra. And I mean, the connection there with the East, I think, is really interesting. But it's also just interesting to know, like, this is a tradition that sounds a lot more like all these other world traditions than the one we're being taught, which is like this weird divorced Zeus. Like, we have this like kind of Greek mythology where there was a pantheon, but then the father got divorced and now we only worship the dad. That seems what Christianity is evolved into, which is right. I don't know. Chad, what do you think about that in terms of Deuteronomy?
Yeah, well, it goes back to like the idea of the ancient traditions. So looking back, a lot of scholars have noticed that most religions have very similar ideas. Like there's the Sky Father or whatever, right? More specifically, with the Deuteronomist reforms, the closest religion to the Israelite religion would be the Canaanite pantheon. And you see these very similar ideas. So there's the Father God, right? El, right? And then there's Baal and Yahweh, which in the Hebrew Bible, there are directly poems about Yahweh that are taken from the Baal cycle directly, right? So at some point in time, they seem to have been conflated because, Baal isn't even a title. There's different gods called Baal. It just means Lord. And then it sort of ends up splitting off into two different directions and becoming two different gods that are sort of rivals and hated by each other's cultures, right? But you do see that overlap in stories. You see in Egypt, there's the idea of Osiris. He resurrects from the dead, and then because he resurrects, the pharaoh can be resurrected. The Baal cycle has Baal resurrecting from the dead, right? We have direct references to Yahweh being crucified in the Hebrew Bible. Every culture has this idea of a flood story. The Native Americans, they literally have a rainbow appearing in the sky as a promise not to flood the earth in their flood story, which is directly from the Hebrew Bible, right? So it's this sort of Adamaic religion where there is truth found in all religions, and sometimes it gets corrupted, but it comes from an original source, right? That there is an original Adamaic religion that has these more esoteric ideas, and sometimes they get a little too crazy, and other times people, like the Deuteronomists, they too far secularize and politicize the religion, right? You're muted.
I know, it was amazing. There's also this thing I was going to ask Longo about because of that, which is this idea in the stories of history, there's multiple resets and multiple migrations. Like even in the Book of Mormon, you have the Jaredite thing is happening thousands of years early. It's happening right after Tower of Babel, right, essentially, versus Lehi's 600 BC, which is right before the fall of the first temple. So you have two different cultures that simultaneous, and I wonder what you think about that idea, Longo, from what you're looking at in terms of like the migration in Atlantis to Florida, especially considering one of the things we heard earlier is that the Jaredites were the giants, right? And
Oh
something
yeah.
you talk about a lot is giants in Florida in this region.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. But
I'm putting my glasses back on. Darn it! What's the heck?
Let's
Yeah, I
head it.
mean, before he gets into the giant stuff,
like
it might be
Matrix
good to
agents.
pull up that reference I had where Joseph Smith, it was in a journal from the daughter of one of his friends. They accidentally uncover a
Yes, it
mound
is.
and there's giant bones in it, and Joseph Smith straight up says these are the bones of the Jaredites. It's recorded in a journal. It's on the official LDS website. It's right there.
Right. I'm gonna find that while you talk. Go ahead.
Well, I don't
So-
know much about LDS or Mormon history, but I know what's in Florida and how that kind of led me to the conversation. Wayne May, of course, it was my entry point to LDS archaeology, but I've already been, very into Hebrew, Native American Israelite theory. That's what I'm working on right now too. Why I'm very eager to hop on this and got a lot of stuff fresh. Hasn't been talked about much. Most of it coming out of Florida, but I think you guys will like it.
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
awesome.
I'm definitely interested to see what's coming out of Florida because like there's the Bat Creek Stone and the Newark Holy Stones, and those ones they seem, especially with the Bat Creek Stone, completely legit to me. There's some sketchy things about the Newark Holy Stones, but they did
Mhm.
literally carbon date the wooden coffin it was found in, and it was like 300 AD or something, and it has the Ten Commandments on it, and it was on a controlled dig too.
Of course.
Uh,
Okay,
but that's
here's some.
the thing about the giants. I'll go ahead and read that. Um, when we were ready to leave for Nauvoo, Father took a bound man for help. Father drove the ox team with covered wagons and a white top for our family to make the journey. We arrived in 1841. This is from Elizabeth Baum's journal. Father fled on wood and farm 6 miles east of Nauvoo in Illinois. Between that place and Carthage, he built a comfortable home, farm, and fenced his land. One day, in about 1844, The pigs were feeding in the wood and rooted in evidently ancient mound, unearthing some bones, which father discovered was a human skeleton in immense proportions. Among the bones was a huge skull. He drove the pigs out of that field and brought the skull to the house to show the family. He held it up over his own face. It was so large it frightened mother and us children terribly. He took it and went back in excavating further. He found 12 giant bodies buried in the form of a wheel, with heads to the center forming the hub. They were between 7 and 8 feet tall. While he was thus engaged, the prophet Joseph Smith stopped by on horseback, inquiring what father was about. He soon discovered the size of the skeletons and remarked, "Jacob, those were Jaredites. Cover them up and let them rest. Fence them in so nothing can disturb them further." Father did this sacredly, performing the request, protected them from further harm. Persecution became so bad, some that the rest of it doesn't really matter as much. It's just more for journal entries. But this is just some random
It's
girl who was
interesting,
like an
particularly
acquaintance.
the wheel, right? This mound idea, and like I don't know if the Hopewell Mound and these things, like there's certain circular burial mounds, but you know, Longo, you've seen things like this, talking about giant bones in also the cover up of these stories too.
Yeah, I hate to, steer the limelight too much over Florida, but Florida is really the mecca of giant skeletons in the southeast United States. Ohio's definitely got a bunch, but over down in Florida, we've got 3 stages of proof for giants. You've got number 1, what you find in the mounds, and they found a bunch in the mounds. We've got some video, we've got some articles. I'm going to pull up if you'll allow me, please.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like that's
And
why I
then,
only added
well,
a
here,
little about it.
we've got everything you find in the mounds, but in Florida, you've got an extra dimension to that. Not only what was put into the mounds was preserved, because the shells in Florida are extra preservative for the bones that are buried in them. The earth mounds are built out of shell. When the rain hits the shell, the lime and the calcites and the phosphates, all this stuff seeps into the bone. You get a perfectly mineralized, preserved bone. That's just why the mounds in Florida are just a little bit extra preservative. Then you want to talk about the spring water. Anything that falls into the spring water is going to get mineralized like that. Then you look at the bogs, and I know the bogs, the Windover bog, has a lot to do with Mormon archaeology and the haplogroup X plus whatever extension. That is right out of Windover bog. That's maybe the oldest site we have with X plus LGBTQ whatever DNA, whatever letter you want to focus in on.
I have
Windover
a bias.
bog.
I like
So-
X.
So here,
So-
hang on. You've got 3 stages. You've got what falls into the water, what's in the mounds. Then you've got the legends of the living giants. Because remember, Florida's the first place that Europeans showed up in the Age of Discovery. They only knew Florida for dozens of years. They didn't know the rest of the United States. La Florida was the name. So from there, you have living, breathing, tall men. And we're not talking Plains Indians, 5'10", kind of tall. We're talking 9-foot living, talking, breathing people that the Spanish interacted with, the French interacted with, corroborated. Then there's the third phase. The third phase of this, they're alive to this day. The most wild, resistant group of Native Americans in America is the Seminole. The name means runaway. Seminole never signed a peace treaty. They escaped down into Florida. They stayed there. They kept as wild traditions as you'll find anywhere in Florida, anywhere in America. They were living barefoot, right up in the mud, the Everglades, right up until the 60s. This is like such a nice sealed sample to examine because they were so insular in Florida. And
what were Europeans looking for? The Fountain of Youth.
Savages.
Fountain of Youth. Yeah, I've got a good one here, but since we started off with giants, you guys, whatever you guys think about that, but we'll bring in a video if you'll let me. I'm going to present one.
Yeah, cool. While you're setting that up, just to corroborate something you're saying there that I think is interesting, because we talked about in Lehi and the Jaredites, right? So the idea that Lehi went west, we kind of have this idea, maybe looking at, where's my picture there? Missouri as Eden, which is, an idea that you have the western and sea interior. You have an exodus through Florida, and you have a re-entrance, perhaps either into Florida, the Caribbean, into Mesoamerica, which is interesting because if you look at the population histories of the Olmec, they really kind of align with the arrival of the Jaredites, and the ending of the Olmecs is kind of with the historical ending of the Jaredites. So this is interesting to me because of this idea that there probably is both a haplotype X migration west and then a haplotype Q migration. And this haplotype Q migration goes east over Eurasia and might go over the land bridge, but also I assume goes through the water. Because this is what they say, right? The Jaredites supposedly take essentially submarines, which are these boats that have holes in the top and the bottom, and they're able to go in the water, right? Which is kind of an antiquitech idea, right?
Well, so actually, I want to speak on that. The Jaredites being giants kind of makes sense when you think about how the brother of Jared and the family were asked to leave Babylon immediately, right? They're asked to leave Babylon immediately to come over to, the new land. And you kind of have to wonder, why were they hiding inside of barges? What about their appearance would make them want to shield themselves as they crossed waters? I mean, especially you think about what's preceded the Tower of Babel in the Bible, right? You've got man fighting monsters. I mean, you've got giants all in the Old Testament, and it's man versus giant repeatedly. You think what would happen if they saw a couple of boats full of giants? Well, they'd probably sink it. You'd kill those people immediately, right? So I do think that kind of adds to that legend, kind of that lore of, well, why would they want to hide themselves as they're crossing over the ocean? Why would they want to do that? What about them was,
totally
shocking enough?
crazy. Yeah,
Right.
because the thing was such a different time with up to the flood period, you have all of these different people. And again, you don't just have verses, you have man and man's daughter knowing giant, like there's like different hybrids going on.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's all kinds, and people living for hundreds of years. It's a crazy world that we're described at that time. It's very different than ours. Here, Longo, here's your clip.
So just real quick about the covered boats, the Irish, the Gaels, those types, they were known to make covered soup bowl type turtle boats as well. I think it has a lot to do with turbulence and waves coming over the top, not having a mast on that big of a boat. You're talking about a 500-foot boat. You can't build a mast that tall, that wide. I think it had to do with water coming over the edges. It's consistent with what we kind of have legends leaving Florida, the whole Gopherwood deal. But yeah, let's play this clip, please. Thank you. This is stored in FSU.
So all of the Windover postcrania is kind of housed in these cabinets, and the crania is just around the corner. So just to kind of show you some of the ideas about the preservation, right? This is one of the males, adult males, that's absolutely massive.
Absolutely massive.
These individuals were very large.
Very large.
And preservation is just so immaculate that it's hard to believe that these are 8,000 years old.
These are 8,000 years old.
I mean, we've had researchers come in here and say, are you sure that they're this old? They really could be a lot younger. So even just compared to me, right, in terms of a hip placement, my knee is up here.
Big ol' boy.
And I'm 5'11".
So we got a 5'11" doctor of archaeology, anthropology at Florida State University. We don't hide all our bones here in Florida. There was a big issue with the Vero man in Smithsonian. And then there was another big issue in Florida where we sent bones to the Smithsonian and they lost them. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's documented. Florida was upset about it. And since then, we've been pretty reticent to send bones to them when they find them. So FSU has a bunch. The Windover site is that particular site that bone came from. that was pulled essentially out of like mud, like soup. There, on those same bones, they found full brains. When they found these bodies, then they'd say 8,000 years old. You know, whatever, you can doubt radiocarbon, whatever, but they say 8,000 years old. This bog was so preservative, and they took such care with the burials that when they pulled them out, they thought they'd found a serial killer's dumping site. They thought that these were bodies from the 80s. There had been people who'd been missing in Florida. They started trying to match their teeth up. You know what I mean? Like, then they do some studying. These are 8,000 years old, or at least what we think of. The strata, based on the strata where they're submerged and the carbon dating, they line up with 8,000. Regardless, what we think of as old, they're old, and they have the haplogroup X.
Interesting.
One of the
So-
oldest. Yeah.
So that's really interesting because typically we're thinking. So if you could pull up the haplogroup document I put together to sort of show the comparison of the two haplogroups.
Oh, and just like really quickly, because Longo showed me this and I knew nothing of this before, these are anchor stones and they tie them to boats. Longo showed me this. I was really interested to find out that there's a series of anchor stones that are both where they think the Noah's Ark is in like Turkey, right? Mount Ararat. And then there's these giant ones that are, I mean, again, imagine how big the ship has to be, how much bigger this rock is than people for how big these ships are. They're all, where are they? Florida. Florida has the biggest ship stones. It's just crazy, right? And then there's a few around the world at these like really important megalithic sites. So
Yeah.
but
The
here
only
Right.
Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
there's another
ahead.
image in there that
Oh
I
wait.
made.
Sorry, Longo was about to say. Sorry, what were you gonna say? We'll go back to it.
It's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Right. So there's another image in there as well that I used AI to generate. I had it describe the haplogroup T DNA because we don't have a chart for that, but haplogroup T, which is exclusively Jewish, they've done studies on it, is found among Cherokee populations. Right. So that sort of shows that. But if you want to go up to the two main haplogroups up there, so R and X are we know X is pre-Columbian, right? I'm surprised to hear that's in the giant bones because that's like Jaredite, not Nephite, I'm thinking, right?
Exactly. It's Jaredite, or at
Right.
least that's what that means. You know.
Yeah. But it looks like, based on the distribution, the R and X haplogroups, if not from the same migration, are from the same populations. They are heavily around the same area. And the only area they're really concentrated in that way together, aside from the Americas, is in the Middle East, right? So it is exclusively Middle Eastern DNA. We also have the haplogroup T that, according to the study that was done on Cherokee populations, 60% of Cherokees had that haplogroup T DNA. I can't find a distribution chart of it anywhere, which is why I tried to make my own. I had AI describe it and then had them put it over a blank map, and it kind of looks like crap. But there you see that
I like it.
there is haplogroup T mostly around the same populations as X and R.
And consider this also: the locations are places where there are like Alexandrian runestone or the Hudson Bay or the Beaver Bay, or places that are like the land bridge. So this is interesting to me because it infers kind of an evidence, right? That there's not just one, but there's two migrations that happen. One that's deviated a bit later in time and has become something different, but they do come from the same place. And so, but they both end up in the Western Hemisphere, which is weird for two reasons. One, because we're told that that's not the evidence that we see, even though here it is the evidence. And two, because that's also literally in the Book of Mormon, which is crazy because, like, to say there's two migrations is a lot more than saying, okay, maybe it was just one family in a boat or something, right? This is kind of nuts.
Well,
Not even two,
to
three
to
DNA
me-
groups.
Right.
Well, my only qualm with LDS archaeologer, enthusiasts is kind of the blinders that they can get towards any pre-Book of Mormon Israelite connections. I mean, hell, how'd they know where they were going? There had to
Right.
have been some type of Phoenician or Israelite or even Atlantean legacy for them to
Right.
kind of trace the path. This wasn't just a stab in the dark. You don't just have 3 migrations of people wind up in the same spot
Yeah.
haphazardly. And of course, the Lord's leading their way, but
it's exactly, that's kind of the interesting idea then, because because I always thought the weirdest thing that I've ever heard the Mormons say, Eden is in Missouri, of all places, Missouri. But then you look at it, and it's the only place that makes sense, because out of Appalachia through Laramidia, which is like literally the borders of Utah to Missouri, is this sea, and then out through basically this amazing channel of lagoons and islands and whatever Florida would have been, probably like the most amazing thing possible, because you'd have gone from one island to another island. It would have been like Croatia, just like tops of islands and fish and everything. It would have been the best place in the world, right? And then from there, maybe there's a storm or there's a curiosity, but out of the Western Hemisphere into Africa, right? And so that explains a lot then, because when you have everything coming from one place, but then there's an ending to an extent, but not really, because the other thing is this idea that the entire world is flooded. That doesn't necessarily mean that only Noah's Ark survives, right? It might be the knowable world, Aristotelian world, might not include all of the Western Hemisphere the way we understand it, right? There could be all sorts of circumstances like that.
Yeah. And
but I also want to agree with you, Longo. We shouldn't just presuppose these things to fit, but it is interesting that they seem to fit, right?
Oh no, they fit. They fit. I just don't want to say it needs to,
right.
It can't just, the conversation can't be, well, here's our 2, oh, well, there's an 8,000-year-old bone. Well, it must fit into this migration or that migration.
And it's interesting because the Ojibwe, what they say is that there was 7 groups of people that migrated here. So not just one group. They talk about the Asian people that came over, right? DNA would suggest at least 2 different Asian groups from different parts of Asia migrated over, but they say there was 7 migrations. They also have, with the Turtle Island story, that there was a group who fled here after the world flooded inside what they call turtle boats, right?
I did a list of places that an AI that have reincarnation traditions in their culture, and I checked some of them through, like Ojibwe in North America, Tlingit, Lakota, Hopi. In South America, Maya, Aztec, South of Inca, Guarani, Yanomami, Mapuche. And it's really interesting to consider just that. Like, you can see the link to cultures that are being later rooted out, right? And so this is interesting, because then you've got 2 places that matter. Because a lot of people are arguing that. They're arguing, is it more important, like Heartland model versus Mesoamerican model? But it could be both. It could be Jaredites are south, Heartland models north.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, is when I'm saying we shouldn't restrict it to 2 migrations, that's the LDS people shooting themselves in the foot.
You think I
agree.
Because when they see something Hebrew in South America, but then their friends are over in Ohio, they're like kind of forced
because these are the only 2 accounts they have doesn't mean that there aren't other accounts that aren't written or haven't been read.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, of course.
But I'm game. I love the LDS lore. I love the of course, whatever ties back into Florida. I think we're getting a little echo off the back end of one of your mics, maybe Kwaku.
Is it me?
Let's blah 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 blah. Yeah, I think that was it. Appreciate it. The turtle boat thing, I'm very interested in, of course, Panhandle, Florida. It seems like Wayne May is really honing in on Northwest Florida as a landing point. And the olive branch that I'd want to extend to the LDS people is, man, have any of them heard of L.V. Edison Callaway screaming from the rooftops that Apalachicola River area is the Garden of Eden, promised land, etc., etc.? Because Wayne May, he talks about the anchors, and I never even knew he was talking about the anchors. I mean, that knocked my socks off. I'd already made the Saxer Stone videos. Then I see Wayne May. He had a picture of John Saxer in there. John Saxer had no idea. I had no idea. But I'm going to try and get Wayne May on my channel too.
Well, you probably also know about Koresh,
right.
Koreshi,
New Jerusalem.
Christianity and Scientology, and the fact that
So
Mormon LDS bought a bunch of Florida,
here,
I think for a reason, right?
my
Yeah.
my Chads, LDS, Chad and Kwaku, are you guys aware that the latitude which splits the two rivers in Iraq, and the same latitude that runs through Jerusalem, the 31st parallel north, precisely, runs right through Jekyll Island, and then it's that 31st latitude that constitutes the northern border between Florida and Alabama. And that's actually Tallahassee is a city built on 7 hills. The largest pyramids in the world over in Africa are on the 30 to 31st ish. Remember, the Nile, where the Nile meets the sea, precisely where the Nile meets the sea precisely is the 31st by 31st, 31 by 31. It might be 30 by 31, but it's closer to 31. You know where the Mississippi meets the sea? 31st degree latitude. Same one. The largest pyramids, like I said, the Giza Plateau, it's 30, 29.9, whatever. You come over to Florida, same thing, 30. The largest pyramids in North Florida. The Lake Jackson Mound, you got copper breastplates, copper instruments taken out of there. The Timucua, the people over there, the Appalachian Indians, the Timucua Indians, their ancestors, they wore copper breastplates. They were master coppersmiths. They were not like your hunter-gatherer types, but who showed up a little later. Alabama. Bama means mound in Hebrew. Alabama, it means high place of worship. It's used dozens of times in the Old Testament. Bama. Bama, Bama, Bama. Some of our biggest, most numerous mound sites are right there by Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana. The border between Mississippi and Louisiana is the 31st parallel north. That 31st parallel, that Jews would travel during the Age of Discovery and set up New Jerusalems. One of them was on the 31st parallel over in Florida. And like Andreas mentioned, the Koreshans, that was a different movement, but they tried to start New Jerusalem in Florida. Well, when
it seemed like everybody went to Florida for that.
When the Spanish showed up, this was fresh on their minds. If I may, I've got a little article here that ties us into a lot of mounds, Israelites in America, theories. Yeah. Now, this is...
I think we're going to get a lot out of this because the way people treat their dead says a lot about what they believe will happen to them, right?
This is an account written from the Spanish reporting back to the king in Spain. What is this, 1559? 1557. So let me plug my computer in real quick. Sorry.
Okay, so also because he got that second there to do this, while he does that, plugs his computer in. Just randomly, I saw this article. There was like an ad, and it was like from numerologists saying 20 signs you have returned from Atlantis, talking about are you a reincarnated soul from Atlantis? I'm just saying, man, they're listening.
So this is Pedro de Santander, I believe. I can't read it. The text is really small, but I think I can paraphrase it. This is the Spanish writing back to the Spanish king or one of their kings saying, hey, you need to dump more resources into this. Florida is and at this point, Florida was the word used for all of North America, right? Because they didn't really have other words for it. La Florida was all of the Southeast United States and everything attached to it that Spain had conquered or declared for themselves. So this is a letter from Pedro de Santander to his king, 1557, July 15th. It is lawful that your majesty, like a good shepherd, appointed by the hand of the eternal Father, should tend and lead out your sheep, since the Holy Spirit has shown spreading pastures, whereon are feeding lost sheep, which have been snatched away by the dragon, the demon, These pastures are the New World, wherein is comprised Florida, now in possession of the demon. And here he makes himself adored and revered. This is the land of promise, possessed by idolaters, the Amorite, Amalekite, Moabite, and Canaanite. This is the land promised by the eternal Father to the faithful, since we are commanded by God in the Holy Scriptures to take it from them, being idolaters, and, by reason of their idolatry and sin, to put them all to the knife, leaving no living thing save maidens and children, their cities robbed and sacked, their walls and houses leveled to the earth. So every historian ever who's seen that has pretty much been forced to tell themselves, well, he's just saying, he's likening them to the wicked people of the Bible, that to justify their slaughter. I don't read it that way. Why wouldn't he just say one of
They're
them?
like unto.
Why wouldn't he just say the Canaanite?
Yeah,
Why list Amorite, which roughly means North African? Amor means love. The Amorites, the meaning fertility, cult worshippers. Amorite, Amalekite, Amalek, Molech, even Mulek if you want to stretch it. Moabite, we have Moab, southwest United States. You have Mojave, a Latinization. Canaanite. Most of these are synonymous with Phoenician, too, by the
Yeah.
way. So,
Which is interesting because like Moab is like the Shemash, and also there's a Shumash tribe. Well, I didn't think about that, but Shemash is like the Canaanite neighbors that really elevated like the Moab god, right? Instead of Yahweh, or Elyon is Yahweh, right? When they started to elevate things.
Now,
So also Canaanite just kind of means anybody who believes in all of it, right? As
Yeah.
a whole pantheon and family.
It's really interesting as well because, like, with the Dave Butler stuff with the Deuteronomist reforms,
Yeah.
it's literally exactly what's being described
These
there.
are the
that
good
Lehi
guys,
was
yeah.
Lehi was being hunted down because he believes that Yahweh, your God, has a father and that he has a mother, right? The menorah mound in the United States, it's been destroyed by the government. It's shaped like a menorah. It has a compass and square on it, but it also, near where it was covered up by trees before, there is the Hebrew letter Shin in an earthwork, which is for Shaddai. It is a symbol of Shaddai, which is the mother, who is symbolized by the menorah, right? So when it's talking about them believing in being Canaanites who believe in a fertility cult, it's like, whoa.
Right.
Like,
now, also, you'll notice, right, the only way to kind of sweep that under the rug is to say, well, Amorite, Amalekite, Moabite, these are just slanderous terms that can be applied to anyone who doesn't match, your faith, and would justify their removal based off the
There's
Old
only
Testament.
4 types of people out there, okay?
But at the same time, he already differentiates your kind of run of the mill Bering Strait Native American, the sheep, versus those who are subject to the demon.
These major tribes.
Meaning there's the sheep who are your everyday Native American, TP, not really doing your Israelite culture. Then there's the idolaters, who would be either too Jewish for their comfort, or they're deviating from Old Testament Hebrew tradition and are engaged in sacrifice or fertility worship, because that was all over Florida. So
that was old Jewish tradition too, right?
Yeah, that was first temple Judaism.
Right.
Like, literally, our theory with the Deuteronomist stuff is that Lehi was from, and some of the idolatry stuff got out of hand, right? But that he was among the people who believed that there was a divine mother, that God had a family, that there was El Most High and his wife Asherah or Shaddai, and that Jehovah was one of his sons, and that he was fleeing to sort of preserve that older
He got out of
viewpoint.
Dodge before Zion turned to Sin City. Yeah.
Like, the tree of life is likened unto the Virgin Mary when Nephi asks the meaning of it, and then the angel shows him the Virgin Mary and says that's the mother of God after the manner of the flesh, right? So he specifies the manner of the flesh, meaning this tree is like the wisdom tree of life from Proverbs 3. right? In Wisdom of Solomon, the wisdom tree of life is directly called our mother and is a manifestation of Shaddai, right? In the Gnostic Gospels, wisdom is directly God's wife. And we see that sort of
Right.
viewpoint being preserved by Lehi, who's fleeing persecution at a time those people were being killed. So it makes me think, no, he's literally calling them these wicked Canaanites who believed that God had a wife and a son.
Right.
Dude, I feel
Also-
like Kwaku's like, hold me back, bro, hold me back. Kwaku, what are you
Also,
thinking? What are you feeling?
philosopher means to take wisdom for a wife. Sophia, lover of Sophia, philosopher. So, blah blah blah.
Awesome.
Can we pull up one more thing here? Because for those who might need a catch up,
See you in a second. Or four.
we're talking about from my corner, ancient Israelite theory. I've got a video coming out soon. Hidden Jewish history of Florida and ancient America. So I guess we're touching base with some of the LDS perspectives here, and we've kind of been talking about some Hebrew traditions, but I want to put something forward that links Florida more to the more Christian tether that keeps the LDS church, separate from your main American Indian Israelite theory. So this one's a very interesting story out of South
Kwaku's
Florida.
laptop died. He'll be back in a second.
I'm
Oh,
going to
man.
use the bathroom real quick. I'll be back.
Totes.
But keep presenting, bro. I'm here. I'm here with you.
Totes. Well, this is a story about the Seminole Indians. James Adair's American Indian History of the American Indians. He dedicates. James Adair was this Irish-born doctor, lawyer, whatever, some professional guy. He comes to America, spends 40 years from roughly 1735 to 1775, living amongst the American Indians of the Southeast, mainly the ones that would end up in Florida, the Chickasaw, Choctaw, the lower, Creek and Cherokee, Muskogee speaking, a lot of those southern tribes that would go on to become the Florida Seminole. Remember, Seminole's not an ancient name. Seminole is the name for the biggest group of Indians we have here in Florida, kind of the last remaining. There's the Seminole and the Miccosukee, but they're both Seminole, you could say, because that's like a exonym. But Seminole means runaway. Seminole, it was applied to a group of Indians around Alachua County. They don't know where that word comes from. Alachua could mean Jew. It's very close to Shua with an X. It's how they'd say Jew in the Mediterranean.
Which would make
Shueta, Jua.
tons of sense considering the Spanish Inquisition. You want to get as far away from Spain as possible. You get on a boat to
Right.
Florida, right?
Well, that's one of my biggest kind of caveats with the LDS stuff is you got to be careful looking at haplogroup X or Jewish traditions, because not only do we have this ancient Israelite migration, you also have Age of Discovery,
Of course.
Jewish pirates, Jewish maroons,
Sephardic, Barbary,
who are
trading, right?
who
all
have
that.
no choice but to reinvent themselves as Indians because they have no homeland to go back to. The entrepreneurial opportunities in America were too good to give up, so they just cut ties altogether with the old world and said, "Well, we're Indians now. What's up, Chief?"
My contention with that is that it actually just corroborates the story more, because then you're saying
Oh,
essentially
yeah.
it just happened
that's
even
the
more
foot in the door.
often.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
foot in the door. That's the foot in the door is they show up. Not only do they have, a dumpster fire to go back to if they're brave enough to go back to Europe, but, oh, hang on. These wild savages that I just bumped into in Florida, they're chanting Yo, Hey, Wah. They're chanting the sacred names of God, of my people. Well, I'm better suited here, Why would I go back? So the Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, Edward Kritzler has pretty much proved this. Donald Panther Yates has pretty much proved this. And he does a lot of genealogy and genetics too. So that's
But
like a
then
nail in the coffin.
Are we
Yeah,
then
that's
kind
the
of
haplogroup T guy with the Cherokees.
Mm-hmm.
I like it, especially like looking at, again, we did our haplogroup map and the idea there's two migrations, one going west and one going east, which explains a lot of Eurasia. But then it also makes you kind of wonder about the traditions themselves, right? Because if that's the case, then all of these traditions, are you saying that there are like when you're saying 1600, 1500 that you're going over Sephardic trade is happening, but are they going over before that without telling us? Are you thinking in the 12th century, the 10th
Yes.
century, the Sephardic traders too?
Yes. Well, we know that the plan, what is it called? The Cantino Planisphere. Is that right? Cantino Planisphere is a pre-1500 map that has Florida perfectly mapped out. But
Oh,
Juan Ponce de
my.
Leon didn't show up to Florida till 1513. So you've got a good couple dozen years from Columbus in 1493 to 1513. 1493 to 1513. That's 20 years where Southeast United States is just sitting ripe for the taking. The Spanish have been restricted to the Caribbean and parts of Central America. The Portuguese, which is, by the way, a fake country, fake nationality. It's just the, not no hate, but it's the
Sorry,
expelled. It's the quarantined Jews who were quarantined out of Spain during the Inquisition. The ones who were too stubborn or too rich to get fully kicked out or squeezed out became the Portuguese.
Right.
And so I see people asking about Melungians and the Portuguese.
Well, there's the Ashkenazi Gaelic connection with the redheads and the Galatians and the Portuguese. Yeah.
The Spanish overrided. They wiped out, erased all the Portuguese achievements in the Americas. I don't know what they were, but they had a pretty dang good map of Florida, even with Tampa Bay and everything. So, it's.
I actually have something in one of the documents that directly connects the giants to Babylonians, actually. So it should be the document that talks about Hebrew writing in it.
I want to say also, I love this conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that, because it's the most inclusive one, because we're all the 12 tribes or 13 tribes by this.
Right.
Isn't that sweet? Okay, so where do we go? Which one was the document?
I
had
a one of the Word documents I sent. It's the one that has the Bat Creek stone in it.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I might have to just really quickly check.
Not Word document, Google Docs. It should be like Hebrew writings or Hebrew artifacts or something.
Mound structures.
Not the mound one. Before that.
Hey, Andreas, could I play?
Of course.
This or I'll read off this little article here.
Let me show them the can I increase the size of this? There you go.
I don't know. I put it in on my phone, but with the Bat Creek stone, I'll go over that real quickly for anyone who doesn't know the story of it. It's Hebrew writing. It was found on a controlled Smithsonian dig. Totally legit artifact, right? Some of the Hebrew writings even cut off because it was broken, but we see the beginnings of certain letters. They did not know it was Hebrew. They thought it was just like random Cherokee writing, even though now they say the Cherokee didn't have any writing, but regardless. So they display it in the museum for years upside down until someone says, hey, that's actually Hebrew writing. And then they immediately say, oh, there weren't Israelites in America, blah, blah, blah. And they debunk it as fake. And now a group of Cherokees, I believe, has gotten it back. And they're Cherokees who believe that they're of the lost tribes of Israel. Like, there's entire groups of Native Americans that straight up are like, no, we're part of the lost tribes. We know we are.
Sure.
But scroll down. So it's not that I want to do. It's the cuneiform. So there's also been cuneiform found all throughout the Americas. Should be in that document.
I don't see it. I just see a big old nothing.
Here, I'm gonna go out of this real quick.
Yeah, you have to make separate tabs for each image.
My God, the world we live in. So wait, while that's happening, do you want to play your video?
I've got this little article here.
Yeah, okay.
Chad and Kwaku's not back yet?
No, we could wait a second. Do you want to do something else for a second?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
But
There he is. He's back. He's here.
Oh, nice. Folk Tales of the Florida Seminoles. So James Adair, perhaps, and Chad, I think you got a little bit of an echo going on your end. But James Adair spent 40 years with the American Indians of the Southeast. He came, or maybe it's your end, Andreas. I'm still here. My bad. He was the greatest authority of his time on the Native Americans of the eastern United States.
Plot
James
twist, it was your screen share.
Me?
Yeah, don't worry, I muted it.
Okay, my bad. James Adair, 40 years living, trading. He even went to war with the Native Americans. He married a Native American. I believe he married a Chickasaw woman. He married a Native American woman, 40 years living among them. From young adulthood into older adulthood, he was compelled by some founding fathers to put his account written into a text. He writes this text. It becomes the history of the American Indians. Well, half the book, if not more, the first half, was dedicated to the proposed Israelite lineage, heritage, the Hebrew customs of American Indians. This was early on, 1773. There had been people who'd remarked on it before, but he's probably the greatest contributor and the most, attested, the one that you can't say, oh, well, he's had some, Jewish agenda and then showed up in America and just, made the pieces fit real quick. He lived with them for 40 years. He had skin in the game, right? He married into them, and he had really no way to benefit from this. It was actually pretty heretical at the time.
Right,
say
and a
it-
big
to
thing
say it.
here is it's folk tales. So he's recounting tales that they're telling him.
Yeah. So blah blah blah. He makes this whole thing, history of the American Indians. Half of it's about their Hebrew lineage. Well, most of those tribes he was talking about, Muskogee speaking, Chickasaw, Choctaw, most of those would go on to become or feed into the Florida Seminole, especially the extra wild ones who were extra committed to their way of life, who didn't want to go live on reservations west. The ones who didn't want to go to the reservations went to Florida. That's true for most of the Southeast Indians. That's what became the Seminole. This is an account of the Seminole. Of all the tribes in America, I'll have to say the Seminole are the ones that hold the most links to modern day Jews and ancient Israelites. Sartorial links, Peleus links, genetic. They're, what else can you say? They're the words, the linguistics, the phonetics, the place names across Florida.
There's only
All
one
of
weird
these
thing
are
about
revealing.
it. There's only one weird thing about it, right?
What?
And I'll let you do it. But someone who'd read this in 1773 would be like, "This is not the way I remember the story of Christianity." However, somebody in like 1840s who read the Book of Mormon might see some interesting correlations here. I'll just let you do it. Just go for it here. Read it if you want.
Yeah, so the whole thing about James Adair, that really just sets the stage for who are the Seminole. The Seminole are most of the tribes described by James Adair, where what happened to them after the fact. Because that's 1775 is when most of these tribes, in fact, in his book, he actually remarks a lot of these tribes are going to be gone in 20 years. And the ones who didn't want to disappear went to Florida. Okay, so Florida Seminole, he didn't even have that word to really use. That's what I'm trying to say here. They end up in Florida. The Seminoles, they dress, look, everything like Jews, like ancient Israelites. They grow facial hair, which is very uncommon. They had all these customs, most of the customs laid out in James Adair's book. Go check that out, guys. If you
So
want more
are
on
they
that.
still out there like this?
Yes, they still are here in Florida. They're living, breathing. They're one of the few people who are okay with getting called Indians. They're okay with being a mascot for FSU, the Florida Seminoles. That's
You know what
Osceola.
you know what the word Indian comes from, right? In Dios, in
well,
God.
I'm going down to
Dios.
Florida this winter, so I'm up in Ohio right now. I'll have to talk to some of those guys when I'm down there. If,
And you'll have to go to
like-
the Fountain of Youth, and you're gonna have to drink from the
Hey,
Fountain of Youth.
I'm just saying. I think I know, because there's a very interesting thing that David Douglas, Ancient Answers, sent me, and it's of the Ojibwe by the Great Lakes greeting the white men. And they're doing something very interesting with their hands to show the white men that they're friends, something that you'd recognize if you've been through the temple, right? And they're doing that to show that they're allies to them. And there's a depiction from the 1600s of that. It's very interesting. I put that in my endowment essay about it being an ancient Israelite theosis ritual. But back to it. So I sent you those images from the thing on Instagram. I want you to, I'm going to go over the other ones too, but I want you to scroll down to the cuneiform right now and pull that up.
Okay, hold on. Was it the Assyrian thing?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
cuneiform, it should be there at the very bottom of the group chat we're in. So not just that, but so that's the Assyrian star. But do you have Instagram open or?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
It says unsupported message. It won't let me open it unless I use Instagram on my phone.
Andreas, if you
Yeah.
would, I promise I'll be quick. If you put that up, I'll get to the
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Okay.
Guys,
Yeah, sorry.
Actually, guys, this is really key. You guys are going to want to hear this for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is. I'm sorry. I talk very
The
laterally.
the backstory was important, though.
Yeah. So you've got real evidence for this ancient Israelite theory, but it's mainly like Israelite
And this is like pre-Levi
customs. But
yeah.
but with the Mormon angle, you would actually need and you'd expect to find some Christian influence as well, right? We can't just be cherry picking all the Hebrew customs. There would have to be some Christian element because the Book of Mormon tells us, and I might correct me if I'm wrong, the Book of Mormon tells us Jesus came to the Americas. He worked here, he met with the people, and his message was broadcast across the Americas.
Twice.
Now,
once before he was alive to Jared.
Yeah,
when they're you're gonna love this is why I want you to read this so bad. That's why I'm so excited about this.
So the whole point of the Book of Mormon is that Jesus Christ was always taught about, and they removed him from the Old Testament. So these people fled to preserve it.
Okay, so let's hear him out. Read this thing. It's gonna. I'm telling you, I'm excited.
Folk Tales of the Florida Seminole. This is Reverend Clay Macaulay or Robert F. Greenlee talking about Reverend Macaulay and some legends that were told from the Seminole, wisdom keepers to the Europeans who are trying to jot some stuff down about them. Well, you've got some of their creation story, very interesting. But when we go to
wait, that was the part.
Kunti,
you didn't write.
Yes, okay, sorry. Right up, first paragraph, my bad. When all efforts to remove the last 300 Seminole to a reservation, is it echoing again? I'm hearing an echo. When all efforts to remove the last 300 Seminole to a reservation west of the Mississippi failed, this remnant was allowed to remain in the Everglades, provided they would do no further harm. Suspicious, conservative, and resisting change, their culture had changed little from the time of the removal up to 1880, when the Reverend Clay Macaulay visited them. But foreign influences were readily discernible in Seminole mythology. Macaulay secured most of his information from Koniphatko in 1939. The folk tales given here were obtained from the latter's son, Josie Billy. From Koniphatko, Macaulay learned that the Kunti, this one's, I know some of my chads out there know a thing or two about Kunti, okay? Well, basically, the Kunti is this plant that they make an unleavened bread out of. The Florida Indians have historically made an unleavened bread. Wow. In Miami. In Miami is where we're going to be talking about a lot of this, near Miami. Mayam is a Hebrew word. Miami is a Hebrew phrase. It means people of the water. Mi means who. Mayam means water. It's one of their biggest chants and dances and folk songs is Mayam, Mayam, Mayam. Miami. I've got a video of Israeli dancers chanting Mayam in front of Florida Seminoles. This is, nail in the coffin, but I'll keep reading.
But here's where it gets to straight up Eucharist stuff.
The Kunti root, that's what they make the food out of, a Kunti root, was a gift from God, that long ago the Great Spirit sent Jesus Christ to earth with the precious plant and that Jesus had descended upon the world at Cape Florida, and there given Kunti to the red men. In reference
Right.
to this tradition, it is to be remembered that during the 17th century, the Spaniards had vigorous missions among the Florida Indians. Doubtless, it was from these missions that certain beliefs.
Oh, of course. Right.
I don't agree with his assessment, because the Seminoles actually were more towards Georgia, Alabama, and Seminole means the ones who didn't interact with the missionaries. The ones who didn't interact with the missionaries were called Cimarrones, and we get the word Seminole from Cimarron, but it might also be Semitic. It's the same damn prefix right there.
It's pretty close.
Tick is a Greek suffix. Ole is an American suffix. Guacamole, Coca-Cola. You know what I mean? Seminole.
Okay.
These. No, go ahead.
Right. So, Chief Joseph. So, he was
It's
the
not letting me
Naz
open it
Pars
still for some
tribe, I
reason.
believe it was. It was during some war. He ends up being captured, and he has this little baggie. The bag, if you look at it, it is the Assyrian star from Babylon on it,
Mhm.
right? And inside that pouch is a clay tablet that he claimed was passed down from his ancestors that has cuneiform on it, right? And we see that cuneiform all across the Ohio and Michigan tablets, having Yod Hey Vav on them and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But here's what else is interesting. So in Utah, in a cave, Brewer's Cave, this guy supposedly found two giant mummies, right? These mummified giants. And he found these bronze plates inside of a bark wooden box. The bark wooden box was actually carbon dated by BYU to be from, like, I think it was between 150 BC to 300 AD that the plates were found in. And if you read the plates, they're in cuneiform. So we directly have the giants with the Babylonian cuneiform,
I finally got
which,
one of these open. Okay.
right, being found with this Babylonian cuneiform, which we can assume that's from the Jaredites, right? Because here's the thing, we don't really know what happened to cuneiform, right? But in the Book of Mormon, the Jaredites, they ask God to preserve their language. So if their language is preserved at the Tower of Babel, maybe that's why they kept having that cuneiform. And maybe that's why we see cuneiform disappear across the world, is because their languages were confounded, right? So those are the bronze plates that were found. It's in someone's private collection. I've actually heard people say that it was donated to the LDS church and they have it in some sort of vault somewhere. But it is metal plates made of copper or bronze, I think, and they have cuneiform and other syllables we can't really read written on them. So it's a direct connection between the giants in America and the Babylonian writing system.
Yeah, that's crazy. Those tablets are nuts. I know in Peru they had gold tablets, pure gold. In Florida, they think that, some of the purest gold in the world comes out of the Georgia gold belt, not far from Florida, and that area, all the copper and all the stuff that they put into the ground. I know I said the ground's preservative for like bones and stuff, but the copper can disappear in a couple of years, less if it's getting rained on, if it's getting salt water, So it's not. It shouldn't surprise us that you don't find much copper in Florida, but we know they were making with copper. We know that they were building with copper a lot. The Timucua were buried. The Timucua people, Northeast Florida, they were buried with copper breastplates, very ornate, long noses, lots of long noses, right? And those Seminoles I was talking about earlier, who have a legend about Jesus landing near Miami, the Tequesta, who used to live there before in Miami, before the Seminoles came through and kind of reformed the tribes, the Tequesta or Tequesta, where we get the word Miami, Miami, Hebrew word, Hebrew metropolis today, that the Tequesta, not only did they use kunti to make unleavened bread, that was probably their largest source of sustenance, the kunti. think about where they live. Would you guys believe me if I told you that this tribe, even though every tribe in Florida fished for most of their sustenance, this one tribe in Miami, who had many, many Hebrew words, that they were keeping kosher. They were only eating the fish that had fins and scales. They wouldn't eat the trunk fish. We can look at a site in Palm Beach County and know that it's not Tequesta, or know that it's not Miami or Calusa or these other tribes, the Jaguar nearby, because the Tequesta sites have less shellfish, almost no shellfish. Do you know what it would take for a group of people like that in Florida to avoid shellfish? It's the most
Right. It's
shellfish rich place in the world, yet the mainstream
Yeah.
academics are scratching their heads saying, why is there not as much shellfish in these burial sites? We know they were eating here.
It's
There's
a
no
bit shellfish, really.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to.
So the Tequesta unleavened bread circumcision was seen among the tribes of Florida. I have some evidence on that. If we can play this video, this one's pretty cool. This is Seminoles at a Florida folk festival chanting what sounds to be Yo Hey Wah. You'll
The lost
notice
and found tribes, you know.
You'll notice their facial features are not consistent with your bearing straight Native American types.
Yeah, there's like Sephardic cheekbones, whatever that means.
Who was father was one of the figures,
Interesting.
one of whom the picture was written around in 1894. Also Billy Bullage and many others, but his father was it's pictured in the book. If any of you happen to have a picture of the
Tell me if you hear yo hey wah in this part coming up.
in 1894. I believe it was a later publication in 1911. Next is Bonnie shows the granddaughter, dearest of. Now, want you to help me. Here's this song. I want everybody to yell with me. Come out with it now. Don't hold back. All right. I'll give you a high time like this and everybody else. You can do it fast. We hey ya ho oh ho, we hey ya ho oh ho, baby ya ho oh ho, we hey ya ho oh ho, we hey ya ho oh ho, we hey ya ho oh ho.
Not good enough.
Yo, hey, Bob. I don't know. I get that. Hey,
It was
yo,
pretty
Bob.
quick, but we've got a written record that they were chanting yo hey wah. That's just one little, dance performance. They made him slap on the Indian headdress or feather headdress.
I mean,
They
but have you seen some Russian Jewish hats? Have you seen some of those circular, flat top? Go back to his hat for a second.
Oh man, if you want to talk hats, let me pull something else up, please.
Sure. Okay. Permission granted. But Russian Jewish hats, they can get round and flat, kind of like that.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, that's the thing is, yes, the Seminoles, they wear strimals. They wear strimals. They wear fezzes. They wear hoisha hats. The strimal is the most kind of iconic Orthodox Jewish hat. But when I show this, people always say, "Well, those are modern day Jews. That's not a historically Semitic thing." That's not true. You go back to Sumeria, Gudea, one of the oldest kings that we know of depicted. He's wearing a strimal. That's your original inspiration for the strimal. It's historically Semitic. It doesn't matter who the cargo cult is. They're looking to the old Semitic headwear and just copying it. The Seminoles are probably doing the same thing. That was remarked upon by Minnie Moore Wilson, who wrote The Seminole Indians. This book, she came to the same conclusions that James Adair did. Said they chanted Yo Hey Wah. They did all this stuff. Menstrual isolation, the excluding certain foods. Here's a good one. Not only were some of the tribes in Florida keeping rather kosher, the pig showed up first in Florida. for the Americas, in mainland America.
Weaponized swine, man, for sure.
Yes. Now, the Native Americans, they didn't all react to the pig the same way, but some of them were very averse to the pig. Some of the Florida Indians had a word. They didn't know the pig up until then, but they knew the possum. And in their form of keeping kosher, they avoided the possum because
things with hands like that.
Because the possum was it doesn't, chew the cud. It's a trash eater. It'll, even before they had trash cans, American Indians knew this is a filthy animal. The possum, it's like a pig. And so they shunned the possum. Most of the tribes did not have a possum clan. It was usually left off the diet. And that's another thing. The tribes, the houses, the clans versus tribe in Native Americans, how you can be part of one tribe but have clan members in another tribe. That almost always, there's rarely more than 12 clans in a tribe, which is consistent with your 12 houses of Israel, 12 tribes of Israel. There's never more than 12 in Native American tribes, which is consistent with starting out with 12 and losing some over the years. You know what I mean? Most of them have like 8 to 10 now. The Seminole only have 8 clans left, but they'll tell you they usually started off with around 12. But
there's also a good one that Chad brought up, right? That there's a cuneiform tablet that Joseph has, and like, where did he get the tablet? And I mean, the story is from Nez Perce Indians chief, right? So I mean, that's the idea that cuneiform, yeah.
And that's the Syrian star right there, the Babylonian star on his bag that he kept that tablet in.
Yeah.
Wow. Some of the oldest depictions of not Scythians. I think maybe it is Scythians. There's historical depictions of the battles of Troy, the wars of Troy, that the Greeks have made.
Maybe? The Thracians, maybe?
Maybe. It's in my Greek video, but it's a proto-Semitic people. So either the Scythians or one of these groups that went on to feed into the Israelites. And they're depicted in ancient Greece wearing deerskin bodysuits like the Native Americans did. It was very uncommon to have sleeves going to your wrist and sleeves going down to your ankles in ancient Greece like that. These were people who were wearing like buckskin style pants and buckskin style shirts that hugged most of their body. Very consistent with Native Americans. And then all the patterns. So not only is this a whole new dress showing up in ancient Greek art with this mystery, people who got lost after the Trojan Wars, that they're dressing with feathers sticking out of headbands. So this one in particular, I think this is Achilles, who ends up having to kill a woman in one of these myths. And this woman that Achilles kills or is there for her death, she's depicted wearing everything a Native American woman wears in a Disney movie, with the pants, all the diamond patterns, headband, and a feather sticking out of the headband. It's almost like she said, I'm gonna have to find it. It's on the bottom.
Also, how they wear these kind of feather things. Hey, look at that. What's up, buddy?
Have you looked into the Micmac language at all?
Well, hold on.
We've got Old World Micmac. Old World Micmac in the chat is.
Kwaku's been shout out to Micmac, by the way. And we'll talk. We should, because we gotta get into native stuff. But I also want to let Kwaku talk a bit too. So I don't know if you've been hearing or what you've been thinking about this idea that there are, these beliefs and tribes. Do you have any thoughts that you've been having about all this, about Native Americans already having these traditions before we got here, right?
So,
or the world too.
This is a little schizo. So, to comment on the Garden of Eden being in Missouri, which you referenced earlier, the first part of that is, I think Adam and Eve were probably the first people, as in first covenant people.
Like Adamu, right?
Yeah, I'm not convinced they were the first humans. I mean, they really couldn't be. I mean, right when Cain gets kicked out, he says, "Oh well, I'm afraid to go anywhere because the people are going to kill me." Well, what other people are there to kill him? You know, how did Abel? I mean, how did Seth immediately find a wife? Right? Obviously, there are these other people. And then in the Pearl of Great Price, I think it's in the Book of Moses, where Moses says, "And I saw Adam, which is many." Right?
Right.
So I do think they're looking
So
into this
Elohim is plural, Adam is plural. There's a lot of
Mhm.
plurality going on. They're very
Well-
plural people.
Well, and so it makes you wonder. You know, does every country, did every area have that similar story? Is there multiple Adams and multiple Eves in different parts of the earth that have started? That would help a lot with what Dr. Longo here is saying. You know, that we have these blinders sometimes, and anything outside of the LDS or before, we don't accept it. But I think the Pearl of Great Price would suggest that the story began further before our scriptures claim. And then
Right.
this also gets into, I mean, if we're just gonna say we think Atlantis is real, then I mean, you know, do you expect me to believe that you know they built Zarahemla with nothing but, you know, what that family is taught, and then you know whatever refugees they created, and then all the quote unquote pagans, Native Americans that were here, like, you know,
Who would have theoretically been descended from tribes.
right. I mean, is that too far out to say, okay, we know that there was established technology here, there was this Antiquitech as you're talking about, is there a Hemla built off of, you know, ruins or coattails of that larger civilization? And then does Zarahemla become, you know, actually this post-Atlantean, you know, but society? And
Mhm.
if that's true, that's a much more interesting conversation to have. You know, but the Book of Mormon has ancient technology. We do have these barges from the brother of Jared. You know, we do have this Leahona. Lehi's coming across the water with this piece of technology. It's almost like Jack Sparrow's compass, right? Like it's this magical technology, rotating orb that's helping him, you know, go across the waters. And then they light these barges in the Book of Ether because they can't see at night and it's too dark. So he says, we need light. He says, get some stones. And then Jehovah's finger comes and touches the stones and makes them all glow. And that's how they're able to see at night. And you're going, okay, so they have these wooden submarines with glowing angel crystals that are guiding them across the waters. This is a magical book. We don't treat it like it's a magical book. The Book of
Right.
Mormon is a magical book. Okay.
And I feel like also they're like, look, I don't think you're gonna get it. Let me just say it. Like it's a magical boat. Like because they can't explain all the details because like it's an oration too.
And that's actually one of the criticisms, that, well, the Bible has so much more supernatural, you know, things in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is extremely supernatural. They fought like there's a hint at dragons in the Book of Mormon.
There's
We
like
have these
Jesus
Antiquitech.
as Obi-Wan Kenobi. By the way, were you there for when Dr. Longo read this? And there's like a thing about the Seminole Indians saying that they're making Eucharist from their local plant, the Kunti root, and that they believe that it came from long ago. The Great Spirit sent Jesus Christ to Earth with the precious plant, and Jesus had descended upon the world at Cape Florida and given it to the Red Men, which is kind of the Jaredite prequel Jesus apparition.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these crazy things like that, right? In these tribes.
There's another thing that's really interesting. So I just found out about this from this channel, Uncovering Lamanite History. In Tennessee, sort of near where the Bat Creek Stone was found, there's a giant wall, like 1,000 feet long, that has what appears to be Paleo Hebrew and other
Oh,
forms
yeah.
of writing. Have you seen
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
I was-
it's like man-sized. Like each
Oh, yeah,
character is like
it's
6
huge.
feet tall.
And there's
Yeah.
another giant wall like that in Texas. You know,
Wow.
the Texas Stone Wall City, right? So we're seeing these giant, not only because the Book of Mormon talks about them building wooden structures, right? It's obviously the mounds. They didn't even know that back in Joseph Smith's time the mounds had wooden timbers on them. They only discovered that in the 1900s. But
Yes.
you have in the Book of Mormon describing how Moroni set up these large earthen structures and filled them up with timbers and ditches along the side, and that's what we have. But we also have these stone structures. We have Old Stone Fort in Tennessee. We have that 1,000-foot long stone wall with Paleo Hebrew and possibly Reformed Egyptian on it. And it makes us wonder, like, The landscape was completely changed when Jesus came. We know there was a giant sea across where the Mississippi is. We know that it was there in the time of the mound builders because their mounds go right to the shoreline of where that used to be. So
And you find anchors inland.
exactly.
So, but also, like, yeah, and also teach your money's work out of Kwaku. What do you think these people believed? You know what I mean? Like, when you think about it, it's a very different belief structure than what do you think that they were teaching and believing, right? What do you think this primordial thing is?
Well, are you talking about the Jaredites, or are you just talking about the natives that were here?
Yeah, I kind of think it's both, right? Because, like, what do you think about in that both
Well,
respects?
So, I mean, all right. So if I look at the most ancient theologies I can find, and this is hopefully not getting too David Icke, but you look at Fuchi Nuwa, right? Kunlun Mountain in ancient China. Okay, those are these hybrid humans, right? They're these reptilian hybrid humans. I said it. Okay. You get even ancient Australia. You kind of have, it's like these rainbow. They depicted these rainbow human serpentine people. You've got the Nakash, obviously. So it seems like
the Nagas.
yeah.
Mhm.
So there does seem to be this obviously there is this humanoid godlike beings that were present in all these different lands, and that's reflected in the most ancient writings. So at the very least, we can say they believe that there are these god or godmen that walked among them, and I think this explains, the tradition of the human sacrifice and where this all comes from. But at the very least, we can say that. Now, I like to go a little bit further. Where I think the Mesoamerican model loses me is the fact that the pyramids in South America, in Guatemala, and those lowlands don't look like Egyptian or Phoenician architecture. They look Hindu, and so
it's almost like the Ararat culture is the only thing close to those
Exactly.
big blocks.
So, and I don't have a lot to pull this from. It's just kind of something I'd like to do more research on, because it's clear that some of the natives, the more north you go, I think, were more influenced by that God of the Abrahamic faith. I do think they were in contact with Jehovah and Yahweh, but I do think then the more south you go, their stories and their legends do seem to be a lot more in line with the far Asiatic East. So I'm almost wondering if there was this collide, right? There was this ancient Hindu influence in South America, and then the more north you go, they have this ancient Hebrew influence, and there actually is that divide there. I mean, because South America, I mean, you got it's Hindu architecture. You got like there are no monkeys mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Why are there none of these actual Mesoamerican things mentioned in the Book of Mormon? Why is it goats and sheep, these things that are northern?
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, go.
Can I, if I may tap in here, that's a great point, Kwaku. Guatemala is the name of Buddha's mother, Gautama Maya. The Maya lived in Guatemala. You've got all these Asiatic cultures that seem to bypass Southeast United States and go straight from the Pacific straight to South America. But a big one, and this does go back to Wayne May, so credit due to Wayne May, he hit it out of the park when he came to the Exodus 20:25. Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, 25 rabbit hole, that one of the greatest signatures, telltale marks of a Israel descended Hebrew Mosaic law following, whatever you want to call it, that tradition, one of the telltale signs is lack of geometric stone masonry, like well done masonry, hewn stone, no hewn stone. Exodus chapter 20, verse 24 to 25 tells us why you should not expect to find stone architecture in Israelite places. I'm going to read it here. Exodus, from my King James Version, because I'm a good little boy. Exodus chapter 20, verse 24. And this goes back to Bama. Sorry, we're getting another echo off one of your guys' mics. So
that's
let's
I think
all
that
do.
means my
That's okay. Let's all do our best to mute up. Want it to sound good for the people out there. So Exodus 20, chapter 20, verse 24 to 25. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings, and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And if thou wilt make an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, for if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. Bingo. Why are there no stone pyramids in North America, north of Mexico? Because you're seeing a largely Israelite tradition where they did not build step pyramids. That was
Tabernacles
it was
only.
it was idolatrous. It was excessive. It was decadent, and not only that, everyone was wearing tunics back then. When you'd go up on the steps, everyone would see each other's butt cracks, and that was not holy. That was too holy.
You know what's weird about
That's
that? That's
why it
literally in the
says-
Quran. There's a thing where Muhammad walks ahead of the women. They're like, he's nice. He doesn't walk behind the women, so he can't see their backs. So that's
Well,
fair.
it tells you why they don't. These were master metallurgists.
Also, you don't want
These
someone
were
to steal your
master
property. You're
astronomers.
nomadic. If you're
These were
nomadic, you're gonna move.
master
Yeah, it's
astrologers,
very
master
interesting.
astronomers. Why didn't they build with stone? Because they were religiously compelled. Why didn't they eat the shellfish in Miami? They're religiously compelled. And Bama is the name for one of these high places, these mounds, these burial tumuli. And guess what? There's about how many kings between Moses and the destruction of the second temple? There's 20 something kings. You know how many large tumuli they have in Jerusalem city? About 20. One for each of the kings after the line of David or whatever it is. So the number of mounds in Jerusalem is the same number as the kings recorded to have been buried in Jerusalem. You come to America, we have thousands of those mounds, thousands and thousands. It's the same thing. A high place, Abama, in Alabama, a high place for the Lord, Alabama, and the border between Florida and Alabama is the same latitude that splits Jerusalem, the holy city.
So also, what about this? So you can think about you have the Elohim and you have the planets. You even have like the 7 Babylonian gods or 7 deities in the Babylonian tradition that coordinate with the 7 that you see in the Greek and the Roman, etc. And you have this Exodus. You have multiple Exodus. The Jews leaving into Greece and through Rome and bringing their tradition. This idea that monotheism and monolatry of Abrahamic traditions kind of turned into Zeus, right? And a lot of people don't like that, but if you think about it, a lot of people look at God as Zeus, like this guy in the clouds, this old white dude, right? And that's not really from the Jewish tradition. That seems to emerge at that, right? What do you think about that, Kwaku? You seem like you're thinking that thought.
Oh gosh, you can't ask me that question. It's gonna.
God's not a white man. Tell me more.
No. Well, okay. I'm gonna try to make this quick. We can't actually address the nature of God in the old world if we're using the modern linguistic. So first, Jesus never called God God. God is Germanic and it means Odin. Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were using multiple different words for these heavenly beings shows that monolatry it was the common tongue and was the common language. I mean, you ever said you have El Elyon, you had El, you do have Baal, but then you have Asherah, Second Temple Judaism, and then just for the personal language of Abba and Adonai. But then you also have you have these parts of the scripture where God's like, I'm going to destroy this town. And then an archangel comes down and destroys that town. You have to ask, okay, was that God speaking or was that actually the archangel communicating?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right.
Well,
So you already have these multiple beings that are present in Scripture, but we've done a massive disservice by just calling it all God or Lord, and it's not who is communicating. So the minute you kind of recognize there is this pantheon that's communicating with the people, and then you get into you do a little bit too much shrooms in Nevada, and you pick up an Edgar Cayce book at a New Age bookshop, and then you get into a little bit of Blavatsky, and you kind of start recognizing, okay, so you've got the higher dimensional beings that we call the Godhead of the pantheon, and then you have the lower beings, which is us, right? So you kind of have this reflection. You have this divine humanity guiding Earth, and you have us, humanity. And once you've opened that door, everything makes sense. So even the concept of, is like idiots on like Twitter, like, oh, is God white or black? Sneeko says this. It's like, you guys are completely out of your. It's such an. You're not even in the same ballpark of where the actual conversation is, right? So I think the minute you kind of look into, and I'm not prescribing ascended masters, but I'm prescribing kind of the sanctuary upon a cloud ascended masters, not necessarily the Blavatsky type, but that sort of recognition, who we call God sometimes in the Scriptures, is doing a disservice. We're talking about Yahweh, and then we're talking about a premortal Christ, we're calling Jehovah, and then we're talking Asherah, and then we're talking Michael, and then we're talking these other beings. It was a pantheon interacting with us, and once you accept that, everything else falls into place.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, on that point, there's something I found recently. These what seems to be Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that might be based on an earlier one. So it doesn't have all the New Testament, but has John, Matthew, James, and Jude, which were associated with the Nazarenes in the Jewish church. And we can tell. There's two manuscripts. There's one from Cochin, India, and there's another from it's the Vatican 100 ERB manuscript. And analyzing them, they're not translated from the Greek directly at all. So that's what makes people think they're an original Hebrew. So if you look at the John 1 of it, it's different. So it says, in the beginning was the Son, and the Son was with God, and the word for God there is El. And the Son was God, Eloah, right? So it's using two different terms for divine beings.
Yeah.
And in the Hebrew manuscripts of the New Testament, anytime Jesus shows up, whenever he's called Lord, because Jesus is always called Lord, the Father's not called Lord in the New Testament. It's either saying Adonai or Yahweh. So when Jesus, I think he like heals someone, I forget the exact time, I was reading through the manuscripts, he calls him Yahweh and then goes down on the ground and worships him. And then Jesus is calling his father El. So it's showing that sort of pre-exile pantheon where there's El, there's Elohim, which is the gods or the council of the gods, or El's family, if you will. There's Yahweh, which is like the manifestation of God that interacts with us, the angel of the Lord, right?
Yeah, so if I may, astrologically speaking, a lot of this checks out. It also goes back to the Native Americans, because astrologically speaking, you've got the black race ruled by Mercury. You've got the Persian, which would mean India over to Israel. That's the Venusian race. Curvaceous architecture, feminine, very feminine flowing dress, feminine music, feminine call to prayer. Worship on Friday. That's the big giveaway. Friday, Freya, it's Venus. So you have the Venusian race, like a brown people from Israel to India. You got the martial race, martial arts, Haya, Jackie Chan, East Asians, hottest food, spicy, war, drums, very masculine, rigid architecture. Well, when you get to the Native Americans, they're ruled by Saturn. The only people in all of Eurasia and Africa and all this to be ruled by Saturn is Jewish people to be ruled by Saturn. That links them to Native Americans.
Their calendars and their
astrologically.
Temples are based aiming towards these things.
Now, Kwaku, you brought up a good point earlier about gods and the Nagas. This kind of brings us back to the Indian stories of Nagas coming from the south and the Aryans coming in from the north. the Aryans being identified with the gods, the ones who conquered the serpents, the Nagas, the Cobra people. What you're looking at here
Indoor.
is Jupiterian versus Saturnian. But also the word God, while it does probably go back to Odin, maybe, it certainly refers to the goat. I can say, oh well, this is God, we can disagree, but why are we all using the word God as the gold standard of what a deity is? It all
Right.
goes back to the goat. The
Right.
goat is the greatest of all time. That's God or Jesus, the goat. Jesus was born December 25th. Capricorn,
Right.
the beginning of Capricorn, the goat.
And this is a major
He is the
Mormon
slaughter.
thing is that Jesus is the goat, the scapegoat.
He is the scapegoat. Now, not only that, this origin of saying God, you know when gods show up on the earth, when beards show up. The goat is the animal of the beard. And all the mummies, even the female mummies, were memorialized with a Bach beard, the Bach beard of the goat.
Randomly,
Billy
there's a
goat.
mummy. There's a mummy they found in Utah that has a Bach beard. Did you see this article?
Yeah,
about
that's the Brewer's Cave mummy I was talking about with
Right.
the Babylonian tablets.
Yeah. So there's actually a Bach beard with the
Now,
the tablets.
goat's milk is universal milk, meaning all mammals can benefit from the goat's milk.
I think
And
this
this
is the
is
thing because
another
Christians will
God.
teach you to be a sheep. You know, like you're supposed to be a sheep and a lamb and things like that. That's what the mainstream Christians teach. But the scapegoat and the goat being like, I mean, honestly, a lot of people also associate the goat with like evil, right? Like with the Baphomet and things. But it's a Jewish tradition of the Azazel.
And
There's a-
Yahweh, the two goats, Yahweh and Azazel.
So Jesus is the goat. I mean, and kids these days they say the goat a lot.
Well, Jesus is the cusp between Sagittarius and Capricorn. That's the clash between Jupiter and Saturn. Is the winter solstice. That's why it's the crucial. This is where we get the word crucial. To be on the cross, to be on the southern crux, to be the crux of what we're talking about. The crux
What do you
of
think
the
about
year.
Kolob then? Like, and also this in this reference also to Kwaku, like Kolob, star, all this stuff, astrology. Do you think that that's how? I mean, because a lot of people, I remember, people laughing about star-based Kolob, but we ain't laughing. Like, what do you? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what do you think about this idea of there being more to space and to astronomy that might be in effect, like all of this?
Well, everybody knows that space is fake and gay. So just to start off with that, a bunch of
So what's
balls flying around in a vacuum sounds like a big gangbang to me.
Right, so
the big bang gangbang.
There are really religious
Under-
people that watched this show long ago. But what do you think it really is, man? What are these luminaries? Because the ancient tradition, these are luminaries, and some of these are like realms of God. What do you think, Kwaku? You're pretty. Go ahead,
So
talk.
Man, I'm trying to. I've already said enough to get me looked as like someone out of the loony bin.
You're fine. You're from the future. They'll catch up.
So there's been a lot of talk in LDS circles that Kolob is the dog star, right? Dog star Sirius. Now, that could very well be, but I think the like people being ruled by planets or by stars, it's one of those things where it pops up in every culture, every religion throughout the history of the world, and it's always there, which tells you it's something that comes natural to the zeitgeist.
Yeah, dude sees a star,
right?
he might build a temple to a star he sees.
Right. Like because that's the case, it tells me that there's how do I say this without getting like your channel banned, man?
No, you're good.
No, let it fly, man.
Yeah, you're in the right place.
All right, there's a theory. I'm not saying I actually subscribe to this, but I think it is interesting.
And come back often.
You were naming earlier, like different groups being ruled by, black people ruled by Mercury, you ruled by different planets. There's kind of this theory that we're all children of God, meaning children of the grand consciousness,
that plural
of the
Elohim.
divine spirit. But do some of us have like different genealogies going back to certain divine beings? And
That'd be cool.
I think it very well may be so, right?
I think astrology is actually the salve to this problem. You've got all these people in ancient history recording their affiliation with heavenly bodies earnestly.
Right.
This is getting misinterpreted by all these sci-fi, doofus NASA worshippers who think that when you say our consciousness, our spirit, our wisdom came from this star, the materialist who only knows material, who's entrapped in matter spiritually and mentally, the materialist can only perceive a linear movement, meaning my body came from there, this body came from here, this ship came from there. The astrology, which is the true word of God, the only word of God that can never be written over, that's that which is fixed in the stars. Psalms 19, the heavens declare the glory work of God, they sheweth his handiwork, or something like that. The whole thing about Tesla thinking he was from Venus, no. Tesla knew how to hone in on planetary influence.
Frequencies.
Meaning he's not sending his body to Venus and back. He doesn't think people came from Venus. You could exterminate, or that's not a nice word. Let's just say there was a disease and everyone in the Americas disappeared. Whatever population moves there, it doesn't matter their racial lineage. That area is ruled astrologically. Remember, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. I'm not coming up with this. We plot our ground after the heavens. We, as above, so below. There are places down here that resonate with places up there.
Just straight up orbitals and frequencies. There's moments where things are touching, and there's some people say that something is closer to the Earth and then is more distant to the Earth. In other words, there's times when things are entangled and times when they're distant, separated.
Well, here's something else that's actually exactly in the book of Abraham, right? So if you pay attention to what's being said in Abraham, I'm not sure, is Kolob a real place? Because it very well could be.
I'm gonna go with yes until I am convinced otherwise.
But here's the thing. What's going on is it's comparing the intelligence, which is the raw, eternal nature of our spirits, right? The uncreated nature that's just as old as God, our self-awareness. It's comparing that to the brightness of stars, right? Throughout the whole book of Abraham. So when it says Kolob is the closest to the throne of God, I'm thinking Kolob is representative of the intelligence of Jesus Christ. He's the closest to God the Father, right? He is at the right hand of God. So in a way, there is that direct correlation. If you look at the book of Job, when the Lord lays the foundation of the world, the morning stars, the sons of God, are there, right? So time and time again, the sons of God are compared to stars.
Do you know what a Dyson sphere is? The idea that to create a Kardashev type 1 civilization, you would need to, type 2, you would need to encircle a star, right? So you have something that's near the star, but it's also all around the star often. And it's able to contain all the energy that's transmitted out of this thing and then utilize that energy. It can be refocused and transmitted, not just as energy, right? But light can be used as data. So you could send a laser energy beam from a sun towards another place, maybe a satellite that had saline solution, salt crystals in it, and then use those crystals like a crystal radio set, and then they would be able to pick up on the data frequency being sent by the Dyson sphere. So this to me is what scientists want to do, and if it doesn't exist yet, Kolob will, is kind of my point.
What episode of Star Wars did that come out of? I wasn't really
I know, right?
keen on that. There was that a vacuum company?
Well, at very least, if you could take the volcanoes and make sure that volcanoes didn't destroy civilizations, but you could use the energy from them, that would be a good start to a Type 1 civilization. And a lot of these stories are about volcanoes destroying, or you have this kind of deluge thing, and that's the other thing. Kwaku, in terms of where these people come from, you have. Do you kind of ascribe to this idea that all of the people of the world are of the 12 to lost 13th tribe, the 12 tribes. Do you think that maybe all the people left are that, or
No,
No, like
I don't.
very specifically on our patriarchal blessings sometimes, I know someone that it directly says, you are from the loins of Ephraim, and it tells him in the last days you will be directly involved with the gathering of the lost tribes of Israel, right? I
Yeah.
know another guy who, David Douglas, Ancient Answers, he didn't know he was part Native American, and on his patriarchal blessing it says you are from the loins of Manasseh. Other people say you are adopted into the tribes
so
of
we
Israel.
agree
Well-
that there are a lot of people that are, but you think there are some that aren't, right? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So, touch on that latter day, Chad. My patriarchal blessing doesn't name a tribe. All it says is I'm of the line of Abraham. That's all it says. Which is like, okay, technically everyone's a line of Abraham. I didn't know till later on in life that I was like heavily Arab. Didn't know that, right? And I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of weird how how they would do that, right? But then you look at like, so you look at Europeans, okay? You look at Native Americans. You can look at a lot of sub-Saharan Africans, people in the Middle East, and you can trace back to the tribes of Israel. But the issue is when you get to let's use the correct term that Hindu food likes us to use. People of Bharat, right? You look at in India and in Asia, the further back you go, you really kind of wonder. You're like, man, you guys are from a whole different. You're doing a completely different thing over here. Like you are not from the tribes of Israel at all. Like you are from a totally different ballpark. And I mean, I don't want to go into a whole thing about how Krishna is actually probably real, and Krishna is like in terms of the divine pantheon, Krishna is equivalent to like a CIA agent in a different country, like fighting on behalf of. Anyway, we could do a whole hour-long video.
you
Yeah, I
haven't
mean,
looked into
I've heard the
Christianity,
idea
get
that
into
Krishna is
Christianity.
Jesus. I've heard that before.
It's at very least a master
course.
sequence, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think Krishna is Jesus, but I think Krishna is in the pantheon, and he's hidden from Abrahamic history for that reason. That's just my view. But if you look at the Book of Ether, the way Jehovah appears to the brother of Jared, and he's like, "No man has ever seen me like this before, except for you now." And then Bhagavad Gita, Krishna appears to Arjuna, says the exact same thing, and you're like, "Why are you guys talking this?" Anyway, I think they're still both the son of God.
Just on a side too, the idea of like Krishna getting drunk and taking a bet, place like that he could live the life of a mortal being completely restrained to the flesh and then die for everyone's sins, seems like the kind of thing he might do. I'm not saying it is, but I'm just
Yeah.
like
Well, I think.
personality type.
It's
Oh
also
gosh, you guys can't
interesting
get me started on the subject of
because
Krishna.
it
I get
goes
too
back
excited.
to Deuteronomy 32:8 in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the First Temple Judaism, right? So in the New Testament, what is the quorum of the 70? Well, they're meant to represent the 70 sons of God who were given the 70 nations, right? When the Tower of Babel comes, it separates into 70 different languages. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, the older version of Deuteronomy 32:8.
Oh shit.
Oh no, they were
See,
like, that's it.
R.I.P. Mossad got him.
I said something too deep. One thing I thought was interesting is that the dude who made one of my favorite comic books, the Batman Book of the Dead, the whole point is about like the Bat Creek Stone being the secret piece that unites the four corners of the earth. Monoliths. There's 4 monoliths, one from like Egypt, one from,
Bro, yeah,
Russia,
I remember.
one South America and Africa.
I remember watching like Scooby Doo. I remember going into like ancient Israelite in America theories, and then I'm like, dude, I started having flashbacks. Like Scooby Doo had episodes about this. Like all our favorite childhood cartoons had at least one episode where it's
Freaking
kind
Atlantis.
of tipping the hat to one of these theories. Also, talk about Jews and Native Americans. This is going to be in my new video too. Hollywood's habit, some would call it a problem, of casting Jews as Native Americans in movies.
Oh, interesting.
This is extraordinary. They had so many Native Americans available, and they would usually put them as extras. But when they needed a strong lead who could speak English, they would use a Jewish person.
I hadn't considered that.
And when they do that, Tonto, the original Tonto from Broadway, was Jewish. The I've got a whole list of my video. I don't know them off my memory, but Tonto. Who else? I'll just go look.
I
at
can
the list.
Yeah,
believe. I can believe that.
that Adam Sandler Native American movie was really bad. It was just terrible. You know?
Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks plays this is kind of like a joke. He plays a Yiddish speaking chief. So it's
Yeah,
not just Israel. They're like joking with it.
So you're saying that you think the higher ups in Hollywood might be winking this at us, like telling us the truth to our face, but in a comedic way. Where
Mel Brooks, I think that was. He's making fun of making fun of.
He's the kind of guy who
theory.
might do that. It's like, of all people. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it except for the fact that it's Mel Brooks.
But then the other guys, Mingo from Charlie Boone, Mingo, right. Tonto. I'm gonna just got a little list here.
But also, I do want to ask, Kwaku, in terms of like, I was gonna look at this picture for a second while I asked this question, because like, there's a lot of these cultures do human sacrifices, and this kind of reminds me of blood atonement. And what do you have any thoughts on things like that, on not just human sacrifices, but in general the idea of sacrifice, because that's kind of related to the scapegoat or atonement. Seems like a major thing in religion.
Yeah, so I've got a slightly heretical take on the atonement.
Go.
I think we've made it far too much about like God killing Jesus. Like God needed Jesus to die to satisfy his wrath. That's kind of seems to be the
major cop out.
Yeah.
It's capped.
When I don't think the New Testament reads that way, I do think God in his divine plan allowed that to be, the pinnacle of the understanding of rising against the massive ego, and the mass ego, which is, sin. But you have all these sacrifices. You have sacrifices to these demons who are saying they're gods.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is, when you get to the New Testament, they immediately want to kill him. And the most interesting part is, when Pontius Pilate is so weirded out by just the bloodlust that the Judeans have, he's like, well, according to your law, if we kill this man, we have to let someone else go. The only person we can let go is Barabbas. He's a serial murderer. And they go, give us Barabbas. And Pontius Pilate is just so freaked out by these people. He's like, I can't believe it. They'd rather let a murderer go than you. So they kill Jesus. But the resurrection seems to be I think the resurrection is key to the massive shock on all the people that knew sacrifice to these demonic gods is always how you keep power. The fact that this guy came back is what's terrifying. Yes. And when you don't, when you don't understand this with the application of human sacrifice being common in every culture, all of the ancients were doing it.
Yes.
All of them. Horrific, disgusting. But the fact that they immediately knew it was something they wanted to do, like they immediately jumped to wanting to commit a brutal act of murder. And what I believe actually was, I think the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing it.
Yes.
As a sacrifice.
They're like, get this guy.
Yeah. Following,
Yeah.
So
it's also like
right. Which hold on. I want to harp on that point though, because here's the thing: it's not just that it's irrelevant. This heretical, and by the way, heretic means ability to choose. So it's not just a heretical idea. What you're saying, this has major implications. If it's not just that Jesus was murdered, and it's also that Jesus was sacrificed. So there's a blood atonement sacrifice being done, not for God, but by somebody evil. Then what we're seeing is the immediate perpetuation of what they're calling the apostasy, and why Christ is so relevant to that, because it's the literal fork in the road. What do we do with that? And the other thing I want to say is, I don't know if it's fair to blame the Jews, because it was an election, and you have to imagine how elections get rigged, And so this election, what was the guy's name? It was Yeshua versus Barabbas. Well, we know Abba is father, Bara is son of. Barabbas actually means son of the father. So I can easily see a bunch of people screaming, bring us free the son of the father. I mean, it's just such a good
Day of Atonement.
If I may. Sorry, check and go ahead.
Well, it's the Day of Atonement, because with the Day of Atonement we have two identical goats, one named Azazel, who's Satan, and the other named Yahweh, who's the Lord.
Right.
And
this is straight out of Yom
Azazel-
Kippur ritual, bro. This is from
yeah,
Enoch.
and Azazel is let go and cast out, and that's why they're saying you have this tradition of letting one go,
Yes.
is because it's the Day of Atonement, right? So that's why it says that no substitute was used, is because it was actually the Lord being sacrificed. But going into that, I think it's Origen of Alexandria, who said that Barabbas's name was also Jesus. So you have the two identical goats. You have, who are you going to choose to let go? Jesus, Barabbas, son of the Father, or Jesus, who says he is Christ, which the Christ in this older viewpoint, the Davidic king, if you look at Psalms 89, the Davidic king is equated with Yahweh and the son of El, which Yahweh sits on the throne of the Davidic king, and when David is anointed on there, he becomes the son of God.
Right.
Hmm.
Now,
Well,
Kwaku, I'd love to touch on some
Can
of the
I
great.
can I add in one thing? I know you're
course.
dying. I can
Yeah,
see.
of
I can see
course.
in your eyes. You're dying to say.
All good.
Larry, Chad, that's beautiful. And the two things that I think hone that in is in this being, in terms of the scribes and the Pharisees being a sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice to their secret God. Which, yes, I do believe the leaders
Yes.
in Judea had a different secret God they were worshiping. Is the fact that Jesus' final act of rebellion was flipping over the tables of the money changers.
Yes.
Right? It was
Kwaku.
messing with the
Right.
bankers.
Kwaku.
But then,
Kwaku.
but wait, one last
Okay.
thing. I know one last thing.
Go
One
ahead.
last thing.
No, it's all
One
good.
last thing is this: is it also makes sense why Jesus, you have the harrowing of hell. Why on earth the Son of God dies and then he's in the underworld? Well, because that was part of the sacrifice. They just didn't know he would beat their ass, take Adam and Eve with him and come back, right? According to some legends. So I mean, it fits very perfectly that the secret
Right.
God being worshipped by the leadership of the Judeans was this, in my view, this kind of evil Masonic God.
Well, it's
Holy shit, I just
and
realized
Saturn.
something.
Here.
I just
So
I
realized
have to
something.
cut it.
Go.
So-
Yeah.
With
hang
the
on,
harrowing
Chad.
of hell, with him
One sec,
breaking
Chad.
Adam and Eve out.
Listen, you've got Saturn is the historical traditional father of the Israelites. In fact, the Greeks would actually translate Israel as one of the words and names for the planet Saturn. That's a fact, especially the tail end of L on there is the Saturn, capital L Lord. When
Right.
Noah got off the ark, this is Quaking.
Saturn is
hang on.
Cronus and Zeus.
Andreas, I got to make this point, and then I got to run. Kwaku, I love what you said. I couldn't have said it better. I would only like to flesh out that the origin of this is evident. The people who practice it, it's evident. You don't have to think it's some niche, random god that we've never heard their name of. It's right out in the open. Saturn, Shabbat, Sabbath. It's where we get the word Sabbath, Shabbat, meaning the planet Saturn, the seventh day. Now that Saturn is the god who rules time and space, area, time and area. Rhea is the consort of Saturn, Rhea and Kronos, time and area. That is the God of the Israelites, one of them. Now, that God demands sacrifice, but he never demanded. It's only after mankind opened the blood ledger. You brought up a great point about the money changers table. Well, let's see how we get there. You have the sacrificial system starts off with Noah and his sons. Noah gets off the ark. And up until that point, there was no need for sacrifice. There was no need for this or that. There was an offering, we're told, between Cain and Abel. That is not a sacrifice, not a blood sacrifice. When Noah gets off the ark, we have our first instance of blood sacrifice. Now you got to remember, man didn't know what murder was until Cain and Abel. It had to happen. It had to set the precedent. Likewise, man had to come to know blood sacrifice and meat eating. We were created vegetarian in the Garden of Eden. That's a fact. Jesus came back to remind us of that. It's told that Jesus flipped the table of the money changer. That is false, misleading. That is the result of carnivorists, adrenochromatics who've been writing every Americanized Bible you can think of. You need a good Bible. You need a King James Version. You need a Neoplatonic Bible. Free from bloodthirst. Now, in that system, Noah got off the ark. God never commanded Noah commit a blood sacrifice. It was man's folly alone who opened the ledger, who opened the blood debt. God never demanded a sacrifice. Noah gets off the ark, and out of folly,
He just does it.
he does a blood sacrifice. We are immediately told God admonishes him on the spot. He smells a sweet savor. Just like I do, a vegetarian walking out of Whole Foods. What's that smell? Oh no, it's Outback Steakhouse. Fooled. How enticing the smell of slaughter. Meat is murder. Go listen to the song.
I mean, it's literally what
The
Krishna would
flavor,
say.
savor the flavor of murder. Now, this folly is the worst sin man has ever fallen into, and it is the sin that rules the world today. Okay? That is why Jesus is so offensive. That's why he had to be killed on the spot. That's why the message of holistic, Neoplatonic, vegetarianism is the most triggering of all. Show me you're a man and eat your vegetables. Be done with the adrenochrome. That is the temple sacrifice system. No, Mormons, you guys know this. Eat
Yeah,
your vegetables.
it's true.
Easy on the meat. Now, what else? You made a great point, Kwaku. All paganism reverts to human sacrifice. All of it. Paganism is a slippery slope. You have this concept. We control matter with matter. We shed blood, and in return, we're given material comforts, more food, better meat when they're wandering out in the desert. When God admonishes Noah, he tells him what he's done and how life will never be the same. God facepalms and said, "Oh my God, I just spared what I thought was the most pure family in the world." They get off the boat and immediately commit blood sacrifice. He said, "What have I done? I need to lower the bar." And that's what he does. He lowers the bar. He smells a sweet savor. Come to find out what was the cause of it. Noah had sacrificed one of the creatures of the Garden of Eden. God was seething and said, "From now on, the fear and terror of you will be in the heart of every animal on the planet. No longer will you be a friend to the animals. The animals will look at you as an enemy." That was the price of blood sacrifice, to lose our role as the custodians, keepers, and tenders of the Garden of Eden. When man opened that blood debt, that never got closed until Jesus descended on the earth and struck the sacrifice system from the world. Now, BC, you know what BC is? Blood sacrifice, post-blood sacrifice. Now it has to be done in the dark. Now it has to be done in executive offices, or maybe the streets of Brooklyn. But it is blood sacrifice that rules the world. It is the currency. These people don't want money. They print the money. They want blood. They want you eating blood. They want you just as addicted to adrenochrome as they are. Now, the temple system, that went from Noah to the temple.
You were saying all this stuff, man. I'm like, whoa, this is I'm getting very 2021 BitChute vibes right now. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm feeling.
Jesus never flipped the stool of a money changer. We need to go
What
look
did he do?
at that word. It
Well-
was the shambles that he flipped. It was the shambles. Go
Okay.
look at our Hebrew etymology. The shambles, the money changer was half of the role. It was the butchers in the temple. The money changers weren't there for
Oh,
money.
okay.
They print the money. They always have. They had one door for the sheep to come in, and the sheep and the goats would come in. It was like Costco for human sacrifice. One of the biggest buildings in the world. They had a pen filled with sheep. These sheep would come in one by one, and you would beg, "Oh, please, Rabbi, will you accept my sin offering?" "No, you got to buy one of our sheep." Okay, that's where the money comes from. That's the money changing. Tax collectors were somewhere else.
Right.
This coin that they were printing, this coin with the faces of Baal on it, when they were committing sacrifice in the temple of Jehovah, that's what Jesus came to correct. There's been greed, there's been money
Which
forever.
is interesting because it's turned into Christ is the sheep sacrifice. 'Cause
Well,
then,
Now,
like, what happened?
Jesus,
with
hang on.
sacrifice?
Jesus came in
here's
and he
something-
flipped the table of the butcher. It is the carnivore peddlers of American Bibles who would have you believe it was just the money changer. Prove me wrong. Everybody go look it up. The blood is on all of our hands. I grew up
Well,
eating meat too.
I know it's hard because
Jesus,
Well, here's,
But
here's
I
something
hear you
Jesus
because of the
did
karma
do.
thing.
So, when the high priest would go in for the Day of Atonement,
And
as
by the way,
he's
we're at the
cleansing,
2-hour mark, so let's start to close up. By the way, but this
as
is-
he's
Yeah, I gotta roll.
cleansing the temple, he would do this motion, a whipping motion, to cleanse the temple, right? And if the Christians are closer to the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls than they were of the Jews of that day. They were not Second Temple Jews. They were one of the traditions that came out of First Temple Judaism. The Essenes of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they mention how the Jews of their time were apostate, and they have a lot of these older traditions. They have a type of baptism. They have Jehovah being the Son of God, and they believe the Jews of that time were apostates. So the Christians come from what we call the long exile Jews who thought the Second Temple was corrupted. The temple had been polluted. And what we see a lot of with retroactive changes to the Old Testament is they are essentially using the name of the Lord to justify evil actions, right? So they combine all these different gods together. They combine Baal and Asherah and El Elyon and Yahweh, and they combine it all together into this one sort of Jewish god or whatever, right? And Jesus, who's actually Jehovah, comes and he does that same motion. The Gospel of John, which mirrors the Day of Atonement, it starts with the cleansing of the temple. It begins with Jesus going to the temple with a whip, like on the Day of Atonement, and he's cleansing it. He's cleansing all these unclean practices out of the temple, the same way the high priest would on the Day of Atonement.
yeah.
Kwaku.
No,
Okay, if you want.
Oh,
no,
one thing. I
I
just
still got
remembered.
more
I
in the
remember the
tank.
thing Kwaku made me remember.
I don't know how tired you guys are getting. I don't know how Kwaku is too, like where you're at. So like, I
Okay,
want to make sure
well,
everyone
well,
gets to
listen to
share
this.
before we go.
So what Kwaku was saying about Adam and Eve getting taken out of the underworld from the
Harrowing of hell.
harrowing of hell, right?
Yeah.
On the Michigan relics, there is something that shows up quite frequently, which is it looks like the Ark of the Covenant, but it's in the Garden of Eden. So it shows the Garden of Eden and the fall of Adam and Eve. And then it shows Adam and Eve building an altar and praying to the Lord. And they both have wings on it, them. And they're like these angels. And it looks exactly like the Ark of the Covenant. And then after Jesus Christ, in the Day of Atonement, after he rises from the dead in the Gospel of John, what's the first thing Mary Magdalene sees? She sees the table Jesus was on with two angels on each end, like the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if Jesus just broke Adam and Eve out of hell, and they are the two angels on the Ark of the Covenant, that kind of makes sense.
Well, I kind of interpret that as Jesus came back to set us back to the Eden standard. He didn't want remember, the Israelites wandering, starving. God had to keep lowering the bar for the Israelites, right? So he wouldn't need to punish them every second. He had to keep lowering the bar. And when they got off the ark, they didn't have olive oil. They didn't have their herb garden. They didn't have all their fragrances. This is why I said they sacrificed an animal, and God smelt the first burning barbecue.
Made
He's
you
like,
Chris
man,
out of Kunti.
It's like, man, that smells good. Looks down, blah, blah, blah. I told you guys. Now, Jesus, when he came back, everybody tells a story. Jesus' number one thing. Oh, my favorite Jesus moment when he flipped the money changer's table. Shambles means a butcher. So my last, it's the seat of a butcher, and it came to be known as the money changers temple because the butchers were the worst with the money because they did the most. They'd guilt you into doing 2 goats sacrifice instead of 1. Oh, I think you need another sin offering. You walked in with the look on your face. You don't need to, this is my whole thing. You don't need to trace the lineage of this group or that group and say, oh no, that's a Jew, that's a Jew. You don't need to trace the lineage. This is spiritual resonance. You're
She's
either
about
You're either
Jubilee
team-
or atonement.
No, you're either team blood sacrifice
Yeah,
or you're team Jesus.
right. Which is
Jesus
Jubilee.
coined the concept of personal accountability. Up
Right.
until Jesus, there was a prevailing notion in the world that you can deposit sin into an animal and sacrifice it and erase your sin. They still do this today in
Right.
New York. They
Right.
swing chickens and deposit their sins into chickens. And just think about this, guys. A life without Jesus means you need to pay in blood for every sin, every transgression that you fall victim to. That's what Jesus rescued the planet from. This is why Jesus is like Freddy Krueger to these people, because he exposed the futility of the blood sacrifice system. Saturn wants you to pay for your sins in this life, right? But not the good way. Jesus rules the kingdom beyond. He knows you will pay truly in the next life. The Saturnian or Satanic tradition, if they even believe in morality, tells you you pay for your sins in this life with sacrifice. So if I'm following this rabbinical tradition, I can be the worst person in the planet all year. As long as my blood sacrifice day comes around, I'm good. I'm square. I'm clean. I'm all set. That's what Jesus came to correct. That fallacy that was prevailing across the entire world. Jesus was not just the Messiah of the Jews. He was the Messiah of every human in the world. He was not just the Messiah of this age. He was the Messiah of an eon. He marked the beginning, the threshold between the age of Aries and the age of Pisces. That's a full 12 ages, not just one age. 12 ages, 12 disciples, 12 disciples, right? The discus, there's 12 Knights of the Round Table, blah, blah, blah. The blood sacrifice system, Jesus coined personal accountability. Your soul, your sin, you pay for it in this life and the next.
Dr.
You can't
Longo has
sacrifice
been,
your way out of it.
Dr. Longo has been called as Elders Quorum teacher. All those in favor, please manifest.
What does that mean?
Does it come with mushrooms, or I'll just say I. We'll
It-
figure it
I
out
didn't-
later.
It's a Mormon thing.
It
It's a
feels
Mormon
like
I
it
didn't-
does.
I didn't.
That's
What does that
exactly
mean?
right. You'll see.
It means it was so great. You in our church, you would get called as a Sunday school teacher, and when they
Yeah.
announce it, they make you manifest it, meaning you
Yeah.
get voted in.
Like that guy, he preach it.
I mean,
Well, okay, let me-
well, here, I gotta say one more thing, because Latter Day Chad, you've been hitting home runs all night too. I got to give you your due. When you talked about the
The cleansing of the temple.
fuck, I'll remember. Sorry, guys.
We'll do
was
it.
it the,
Let's
was
do
it
it.
the
We have-
cleansing of the temple, or
We hit the 2 hour. Let's do it again. I'll set up a
No.
ladder wave and get you guys both on.
Man.
Oh,
No, you said something. One of the last things you said, it was
the Ark of the Covenant?
scapegoat or the tribes, Azazel.
fuck. I
Lots.
forget. I'm gonna have to think on it, but
Yeah.
No more. I nay the elders quorum because he still curses.
And
Okay.
everyone go follow my Instagram. I'm almost at 10K. I'm like 20
Yeah.
away or something.
So here's my vibe right now. I want you guys to go to Instagram. Look at it. He's at 10. He's like doing great on the Instagram. Latter Day Chad. Oh my God, 10,000 followers. He's got a really cool page with a lot of cool things. I like to watch these memes go by my screen. Counselor Nebuchadnezzar, Fire with Jesus. You get the whole Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego vibe. Old World Florida, one of my favorite channels. The channel that you're watching this on, if you're not watching it on mine. Make sure you subscribe if you are watching it on mine. He does amazing things. We're going to have to come back and do another one with Latter Day Chad that goes even deeper into synchronicity. And Kwaku, you and me, very soon. I want to do a thing because I love this channel. If you guys haven't subscribed, he's got about 10K subscribers. I've been born again, Mormon case for Christ consciousness. This is one of my favorite videos. It's really great. Origin of the human spirit, because did I mention?
Oh yeah, that one was so good.
Did I
love that
mention
one.
that my boy, and he owns josephsmith.com. Yeah, flex.
Yeah, we
That's
want to get Joseph Smith's name out there to give him the due respect he deserves, because he was a prophet for the world, not just one church. In my view.
Yeah, I'm 100% on that wave. And so make sure you guys go to Kwaku's page and subscribe to it because he's an esoteric wellness frat boy from Utah. I didn't.
I only got a couple videos right now, so give me
but
some
they're
time to
quality.
keep cooking. But
They're quality.
yes.
Definitely watch all of them, and definitely check out Reincarnation is True. This is what I want next time. Now that we've gone all over the world and we've seen all these things, we're going to talk together about reincarnation. Let's do a one-on-one. But also, everybody, Kwaku's on another show called Ward Radio. Make sure you're subscribed to that because he's got hundreds of episodes, I believe. I don't know how many at this point. And Kwaku's in a lot of them. And there's a whole Kwaku's Corner to that. It's super sweet.
I have one episode on Ward Radio.
That's
Two.
true, you do.
One.
Yeah. I'm, we'll see how it goes for me someday. All right.
We'll
Yo,
get you on.
Kwaku,
We'll get you on.
Kwaku, nice meeting you, dude.
Hey,
Chad,
you too, man.
legendary, nice meeting you.
Dude.
I'd like to have you guys back on sometime soon if you'll.
Dude, 100%.
Come on, maybe-
What if you're doing like an episode going in on like the Bat Creek Stone and the Michigan artifact? I love all that stuff. I'm putting together like a paper on that stuff so I can organize my thoughts.
Dude, long on the ladder wave. It makes sense.
Chad, I remember what you brought up. The Essenes.
Okay. I did it.
The
Oh, the
Essenian,
Essenes.
Jesus being an Essene is clear cut. This is why I was saying you don't have to worry about the lineage of Israelites today. It doesn't matter. House of Israelite is not a house. It's not a lineage. It's sympathetic magic. These are people who claim a certain affinity with a astrological sign. There's 12 houses of Israel. They are openly and admittedly the 12 signs of the zodiac. The 4 principal tribes are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. But the whole part about Jesus being an Essene, you don't have to worry about the houses. It's like you said, it's the sects. The Essenes, Jesus is admonishing the Pharisees and Sadducees pretty much his whole time here on earth. He renounces the Sabbath, depending on your interpretation. He's not renouncing the day of worship. He's renouncing the worship of Saturn, Shabbat, Sabbath. That's why they go to Sunday. God bless Sunday. Saturn is Saturday. Everyone gets fucked up on Saturday. But Essene, Jesus being an Essene, also proves his passion for animals and his disgust for the blood sacrifice system. It's the nail in the coffin. Jesus being an Essene, you don't have to worry about which tribe or who or whether someone's Jewish or not. You just need to worry about blood magic and black magic. Pharisee and Sadducee, these are the blood sacrifice, pro-blood sacrifice component of the Hebrew tradition. We don't know how beautiful the rest of that Hebrew tradition was. It's lost to time. The oral tradition, the rabbinical tradition that we know of today is the Pharisee and Sadducee legacy. Jesus had
go to see Midigai.
That's all I was going to
yeah.
say.
You're gonna have to see Chief Midigai. You're gonna find out that there's a lot of those traditions that have been saved for a long time.
Well, sure, good.
Oh yeah, like
Kwaku,
they're
Latter-day
getting
Chad.
all the tribes together. It's crazy.
And you're gonna see it here next time, folks. God bless.
can't stop.